Good afternoon. So we're going to call to order the January 18th, 2017 meeting of the Portland Development Commission. Can we take the roll?
Thank you, Chair Kelly. Gustavo Cruz, Commissioner Cruz.
Here.
Commissioner Edlin.
Here.
Chair Kelly.
Here.
Chair Myers. Chair Moreland Capuya.
So I think the Commissioner Myers is out of town, and Alicia has, I guess, some big demand at the hospital, so she's unable to make it. And that sounds like that could be happening when what's happening in our city right now. Commissioner reports. Tavo, we'll start with you.
Nothing special to report this time.
You?
Same thing.
Eaton? You guys are really making this pretty easy. You know, since it was the holidays, I haven't been to all that many PDC connected meetings. I guess I did have a meeting with the mayor's chief of staff, Maurice Henderson. But other than that, I think it's been a slow PDC holiday. So, Chair Branham, your report.
You look lonely over there.
I know, I feel lonely. Good afternoon. I'm going to keep this a little short. I'm fighting the bug, and so, but it's been a good month since we last had our board retreat, and I would like to congratulate our partners at Multnomah County who broke ground on the new health department headquarters on December 14th. PDC provided $36 million of the $95 million project, which will provide an array of services to local residents and will be a great bridge between Old Town Chinatown and the Pearl District, bringing more people and activity to the Broadway corridor. Also like to thank former board chair Scott Andrews for pitch hitting. The rest of the board and I were at the board retreat on the day of the groundbreaking, and so he stepped in for us and represented us well. Speaking of partnership, I also want to congratulate our longtime partners at the Leech Botanical Garden. The Parks Bureau recently announced that if the garden can reach its fundraising goal, then Parks is prepared to provide the remaining funding for the development of the garden master plan. PDC was an early supporter. We are putting $2 million of Lentz Urban Renewal Area resources for that, and so people who are interested in helping Leech to make their fundraising goals should go to leechgarden.org for more information. I also want to thank Pam Neal and Andy Reed for leading the efforts to expand the East Portland Enterprise Zone boundary. They went to City Council on December 20th to enable local ice cream company Salt and Straw to move forward with a $2 million investment in the Central East Side. So Salt and Straw's project will create 40 to 60 new jobs in Portland and their headquarter and food manufacturing facility instead of potentially having gone elsewhere on the West Coast. And as part of this project, they've also agreed to create a food artisan incubator to help budding entrepreneurs build the next name brand Portland company, and a workforce training program to support residents to get into entry-level positions in the dynamic and growing food industry. They have a fantastic community benefits agreement that includes a goal of having 50% of their workforce be diverse, and the staff work on this was really exemplary, and it speaks to a local company really making an awesome investment in our city. So we appreciate that. We are well on our way in budget season, and we've had a couple of budget committee meetings, so I'd like to thank everyone who participated in those, both the public partners who've come and participated in those, but also Justin Douglas, Faye Brown, Tony Barnes, Francis Thurman, and Courtney here at PDC for managing the process. And finally, it is my great pleasure to introduce two new PDC staff members. So I'm going to start with Penny Perez, who is joining us as the new Senior Construction Diversity Coordinator. Penny comes to PDC from ODOT, where she most recently was the Disadvantaged and Small Business Program Manager. She increased state of Oregon DBE participation by 40% within 6 months of taking the job. Penny spent most of her career in construction in Las Vegas, working her way up in her family business from operations and labor relations manager to president and CEO. She served on multiple Southern Nevada Union Apprenticeship Committees and boards. And in 2011, she was awarded Small Business Person of the Year by Las Vegas Latin Chamber of Commerce. She's a member of the Oregon Association of Minority Entrepreneurs, the National Association of Minority Contractors of Oregon, and the Business Diversity Institute of Oregon. So we're thrilled to have her. Very lucky. We know that she's going to hit the ground running. And my great pleasure to introduce Myra Ariola, who is the new Director of Social Equity Policy and Communications. Myra was most recently the Director of Community Collaborations and Investment at United Way of the Columbia Willamette, where she oversaw community investment strategies, led processes with key stakeholders, and drove related metrics and evaluation. Before working at United Way, Myra managed the Latino Program for Rural Development Initiatives and programs and marketing for Awami. Outside of work, Myra contributes to the community as a board member of the Women's Foundation of Oregon, is a human rights commissioner, and a member of the Oregon Housing Stability Council. Myra holds a Master's of Public Administration from PSU and a BS in Communication and another Bachelor of Science in Public Relations from Universidad Latina de America and Universidad, I'm going to butcher this, Autónoma de Guadalajara, respectively. So we're really pleased to have Myra here. Thanks.
Welcome to both of you. We have some minutes to approve. So I would take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
And I can take those on both, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the November 9th, 2016 meeting and the December 14th, 2016 meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. The motion carries. Public comment. I don't believe we have anyone for public comment. So we're going to adjourn the PDC Commission meeting for the moment, and we're going to open up the Audit Committee meeting, which I need to say is the meeting of the Portland Development Commission is now adjourned. The members of the Portland Development Commission will now meet as the Commission's Audit Committee to consider accepting and approving the audited fiscal year 2015-16 comprehensive annual financial report. And I think we have a team of folks who are going to come up here.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Commissioners, Executive Director Branham. My name is Faye Brown, and I'm PDC CFO. And we're here today to ask that you accept and approve PDC's comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year 2016 and accept the communication with those charged with governance. I'm pleased to report that we received an unmodified opinion on the CAFR, and Moss Adams is here and will explain what that means and tell you a little bit about the process. We felt that the audit went very well this year, particularly in light of the fact that we produced our first comprehensive annual financial report in our new ERP system, and it went amazingly well. We would like to thank Moss Adams for their service, as well as the City Auditor's Office, who administer the audit contract, providing another layer of independence to the audit process. And most importantly, I'd like to thank the PDC accounting staff, Sam Bragato, Catherine Kaminsky, Michelle Whaley, Yana Easmont, and Mary Vic Tupaz for the work that they did on this audit. So now I'd like to turn it over to Jim Lanzarata with Moss Adams so that he can tell you about the audit process, the opinion, and the reports.
Very good. Thank you. Chair Kelly, Commissioners, Executive Director Branham, appreciate the opportunity. You know, this is a chance to kind of bring it all to a conclusion I'm actually proud to say we're going to bring this to conclusion with a whimper. After all the excitement and energy that goes into closing the books and preparing this annual financial statement and our process to audit it, the final reports are, kind of boring in a sense, and I think that's the way you want it. So in a minute, you'll see why I'm telling you, you might be proud that we're coming to this end result maybe with a little bit with a whimper. So I want to tell you the nature of the services that you engage us to provide very briefly, and just give you a sense of the thoroughness of the audit. And then obviously what are in our reports and what do they mean? So we'll talk about that. We do have some required communications which we've provided to you in a written form, so I'm not going to go over all of that, but maybe just comment on a couple of the things that are included in there. And then finally just give you a sense of some of the observations we had during the audit. So in terms of the nature of services, you could probably put it into 4 categories, and a couple of them I think you have a pretty good understanding of. Obviously, an audit is directed towards independent verification of whether the numbers in these financial statements and the disclosures are accurate and complete and meet all the requirements. So we look at source documents, we talk with third parties like your bankers, your attorneys, those sorts of things. I think you understand that pretty well. A second element, though, is a requirement to look at those controls that you have in place. What are the checks and balances that you use and management uses to make sure that the activity that's reported in here is authorized, is accurate, and so forth. And we have an obligation to tell you if there are weaknesses in those internal controls that could lead to errors in your financial statements, and we'll do that today. A third element is to test for legal compliance. So you're an Oregon municipal corporation, and the state auditor's office says that auditors of Oregon municipal corps need to test certain legal elements, like your budget. Probably the area we spend the most time is the adoption and administration of your budget. We look at the purchasing. Obviously, you do a fair amount of contracting with developers and others, so we look at your compliance with state laws over purchasing, the holding of your cash and investments, insurance, and grant programs are examples. And then finally, a fourth element, you're very fortunate to have staff that can put this document together. So not a lot of governments in Oregon have the ability to have trained people on staff that with the requisite knowledge to put this together. So oftentimes auditors get engaged to prepare the statements that they're then asked to audit. And we choose to try to work with clients that are able to put these together so we don't audit our own work. But anyway, you're very fortunate. You've got staff that understand how to put this document together. So our job is really the technical review of it. Is it consistent with the audit work that we did and the testing and so forth? So that's the nature of what you engaged us to do. Just to give you a sense, we did meet with you as an audit committee previously, so we've met a couple times now at the start to tell you where we wanted to focus our efforts and to get your feedback on what you were concerned about that might inform us on where to focus. But we do look at what we believe are inherently risky. You know, the cash and investments, the property held for sale, your loan programs, the revenues. Certainly you're funded by property taxes through the tax increment financing program allowed under state law. So that's a big part of our work. And state legal compliance. So those are the areas. And again, we went through this in detail with you as an audit committee a couple times. And just know that you have a very active audit committee. It's really fun to work with you. You ask good questions, and I think we have a very good collaborative relationship and appreciate that very much. All right, so we did all this work. So what were those reports I'm telling you are going to come to you with a whimper today? So on page 1 of this document is our overall opinion on the financial statements, and Faye already let the cat out of the bag. We've issued what we call an unmodified opinion, and basically that means we didn't have to modify it because we didn't find any errors or problems or material misstatements. So this is materially correct based on all the audit work that we did, and so we don't have to modify or tell the reader that there's an issue with this. So we were able to determine that the balances are accurate, they're consistent with the transactions that you all approved, and the required format and disclosures are in agreement with the applicable accounting standards. So excellent job on that. After all that, you get a couple sentences, and then I think this is where the balloon should fall and confetti, because it's very difficult to get to a clean opinion on the financials given the volume of transactions and the complexity of the transactions that you get involved with here. Another element, a report that we issued, we're required to tell you if there are significant deficiencies or even worse, material weaknesses in your internal controls. That report is located on page 149. And just to cut to the chase, there were no findings that we were required to bring to your attention. So again, excellent. I say it's very common to find internal control weaknesses. I think we've had some in the past with PDC, and your staff has been very good about attacking all of those and coming up with ways to overcome those and make improvements. So we have no findings there. Another thing I told you, we have to look at your state legal compliance. That report is on page 151, and there was just one item of non-compliance that we identified. You had an over-expenditure, I believe it was in the North Macadam Urban Renewal Fund. So you had one item that was over your approved budget. That's probably the most common finding. In fact, it's unusual if there isn't an over-expenditure somewhere within governmental entities in Oregon. Obviously, you don't want it. You want to have better controls so that you don't face that, but it is a common occurrence. So out of all of this, that's the only element that we identified really required to bring to your attention. Now, we did issue some what we call required communications. The audit standards tell us that we need to talk to you about a number of things. And we've done that through a written form, plus we've been before you as an audit committee to go over those. So I won't go over all of them, but as a commission and those that aren't involved with the audit committee, there's just a couple that you might want to know about. One is that we had no audit adjustments. So basically that means that when we went in and did the testing of the balances, management already had those correct. We didn't identify errors that required them to make adjustments. Not only that, but we only had one minor element that a reclassification that could have been made. Some grant revenue got included in miscellaneous income. When you do have a grant revenue line item in your statements, it was a small amount, so we didn't ask management to make that reclassification. Another element that boards want to know, did we have any difficulties? Were we asking questions and it felt like, we were getting wishy-washy answers or perhaps being blocked from getting answers? We never encountered anything like that, nor did we have disagreements with management. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Also, you want to know, gosh, did we get it done like we planned? And basically, we got this done according to the time frame laid out, and we were able to issue this in the timeline that you all preferred. And so hats off to management to enable us to do that. So anyway, that was good news. So then there are more comments in there which you can read at your leisure. Now in an audit, we always have some observations or best practice recommendations, and we had a number of them. A couple of them were related to IT security matters. Some database access and password elements which management already corrected or have already taken steps. We had some observations about some bank reconciliation and timeliness of getting those done. I think in this first part of the year when staff is focused on closing the books and spending time with us to get through our audit, sometimes certain elements kind of lag and then they get caught up once the audit is done. There are a couple areas like that and a couple accounting related matters that we brought to management's attention, but pretty minor stuff. And then finally, I too would like to express some appreciation for your management crew. One of the things that really we appreciate is when management is very open and comes to us ahead of time with issues. So you have a number of complex transactions and things that occur. The accounting is not always easy, and the audit of it is not always easy, but you've got a crew that are very proactive about calling us up and saying, hey, this is what's going on, can we talk about it? And we've really appreciated that. I think to a large extent, the fact that the audits have gone fairly smoothly is the result of their proactive communication with us. This is the last year of our contract, and so this will be going out to bid again. I'm hopeful that we will put in a bid. I don't know who your audit firm will be, but I would encourage you to continue to encourage management to reach out to the auditor, whoever that firm should be, and continue that process. It's very beneficial. So with that, I would open it up for any questions that you may have, or anything else I can do to elaborate on this completion of the audit.
I don't think I have commissioner questions. I just, make a comment that, all the time I've been on the commission, these things have gone pretty well, and especially thank Faye for her good work and keeping our books straight.
Yeah.
I do have, I didn't hear whether or not the misspelling on page 76 was corrected.
I told Jim about that.
I had to have some fun with this because I was proving to everyone that I read the thing.
I'm very impressed, by the way. I mean, these documents are not often read, at least not to the extent that you did that caught that particular.
Pension and liability were both misspelled, so
Oops.
got that corrected. So with that, I would take a motion to approve. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Moss Adams, for doing a nice job on this.
Appreciate that. Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Not going to answer that. So now we need to adjourn the audit committee. So PDC's audit committee is hereby adjourned. We will now reconvene as the Portland Development Commission to consider the remainder of today's agenda. So we're actually going to now switch our items 7 and 8. So we're going to take Sarah Harpole and item number 8, the information update on the Broadway corridor first.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
My name is Sarah Harpole. I'm a senior project manager at the Portland Development Commission, and I wanted to provide a brief update today on our activities related to the Broadway corridor redevelopment opportunity. Today's presentation kind of has 3 key components. One, discussing recently completed due diligence that we've done about how to best approach our work moving forward, walking through our recommended next steps based on that research, and then having a discussion with you. In particular, we're looking for your feedback on the proposed approach and what recommended changes you may have, and then assuming you support proceeding with a development solicitation in the near future, getting your feedback on this, as this would be an activity that we would very quickly be moving into and want to make sure that we are structuring that with your priorities in mind. So where we've been completing a number of due diligence and outreach activities to kind of understand how to best approach our work, and I want to touch on some of the key takeaways from this work. First, to recap the Broadway Corridor Framework Plan, which was completed in fall of 2015. This was the study area for the framework plan. It will continue to be our study area for the master plan moving forward. The city requires a master plan to be completed prior to any development happening on the post office site. But we also own a number of adjacent assets, including Union Station, Block Y, and Block R. And then Greyhound has been an interested party in these conversations, looking to kind of shrink their footprint in the area and potentially redevelop their site as well. Early on in the framework plan, we established a financial framework that kind of outlined the financial realities and constraints and opportunities associated with this redevelopment. The vision and the program help drive the value that can be extracted to the site, which in turn helps us to be able to afford certain public benefits, which then kind of cements that vision and program. So there's a careful relationship between these 3 variables that we're often checking through the framework plan as well as moving into the master plan process. I had also defined a physical footprint for the post office site, so extending and terminating the North Park blocks into the site, identifying kind of priority connections, in particular Johnson, which connects Union Station under the Broadway Bridge Viaduct to the adjacent neighborhood, and then the increase in density of the site and the provision for 30% of the residential FAR to be set aside for affordable housing. This is about 700 units. Here's a rendering of what this level of density might look like on the site. And then again, our commitment to affordable housing and our partnership with the Portland Housing Bureau. They will be a co-owner of a portion of the site with us, and will be also bring in additional resources to bear to help implement those approximately 700 units of affordable housing. They will partner with us through the master plan activities as well as the solicitation for development partners. Aside from the framework plan, we've also done some additional internal work. We did an audit to look very intentionally about how racial equity can be addressed at this project. This conversation was led by 2 members of PDC's Equity Council, facilitating conversations with project staff and leadership. And I think that, to summarize kind of the takeaway, I think we were very mindful that a project of this scale and this location can affect people for their lives for hundreds of years to come. And so being very intentional and thinking very early on about how we can achieve equity goals, what our processes look like to ensure that those are incorporated and that we have the appropriate outcomes from this process. With ZGF, we also did some case study work looking at other developments across the country. A few of the takeaways here, the very specific level of detail that we need in this master plan per city requirements suggests that we should have a developer engaged early in the process. We've seen examples of major transportation and public realm investments helping to drive the surrounding development, and also different ways to structure kind of the maintenance and ongoing operations of these. As an example, at Denver Union Station, they established an improvement district to help manage the ongoing public realm. The developer, the private party, had the responsibility for the maintenance of the public realm areas, and so that was their means to do so. And then agreements can be structured in a variety of ways to ensure the public benefits we want to see, as well as the timelines and the diversity of developers who might be involved in projects moving forward. We interviewed a number of capital market experts as well, and I think one of the key takeaways there was that we need kind of to engage national expertise to best determine how to bring this project to market, and looking beyond the kind of the Portland region. And so we're interviewing a number of potential partners there and their expertise. And then we've held conversations with a number of stakeholders across the city and beyond to be very intentional about broadening the engagement and the interest in this project. We held a kickoff workshop on December 7th with approximately 185 attendees to really have a conversation about what public priorities and wishes were for this site. As part of that event, we had a best practices panel. A few highlights from their thoughts. We also had the opportunity to hold a lunch session before the event with them as well, which I think was very helpful in kind of walking through their expertise from a number of topics. So Ben Beach with Partnership for Working Families spoke to really how do you have a quality process around community benefits agreements and making sure you have quality engagement so that the outcomes, the benefits are truly beneficial to those who you've engaged. Shelley spoke to sustainability and the importance of really putting people first when you think about sustainability approaches and making sure basic needs are addressed through those approaches. And Tuan highlighted that this is a highly desirable site, and that as we extract the value from the site, being very mindful about who participates and who benefits from the project. And then Nolan with ZGF, who worked with us on the framework plan and will work with us on the master plan, spoke to kind of the unique opportunities that this site provides in the central city, but being mindful both of the kind of the urban design and the architectural relationship to the public realm, and making sure you have appropriate roles assigned to the different areas of the project and designing accordingly. Similarly, Fred Kent, I think, also touched on this theme as well and talked about different kind of tools or techniques to activating the public realm, as well as looking at interim opportunities and ways to be nimble in creating kind of exciting spaces within the development. As part of the workshop, we also had a small group discussion exercise where we asked members of the public to, at their table, kind of prioritize potential public outcomes or project outcomes. And so here you see kind of the data from that survey and kind of what rose to the top. We've heard some kind of the interest in open space and public realm was so high because as you look at the density within the site, being able to have kind of breathing room and spaces around that around the project. And then you also see kind of thematically both housing and accessible jobs also rose to the top. So again, key takeaways from this work over the last 6 months or so. Engaging regionally diverse stakeholders in a meaningful and effective way, and this takes both time and resources. Groups that we would like to engage need to have resources to do appropriate outreach to their constituents, so we'll be looking at how we can partner with them to make sure that they have the tools they need to do that. Discussing equity early, structuring process, deals, partnerships with these goals in mind, and being very intentional about that. Again, developing a developer early in the process, given the level of detail that the city requires from the master plan. And then as we have an opportunity to really maximize both the value and the benefits that can be delivered from the site, and so we're really pushing as far as we can with our development partners. Phasing development, as development occurs here, we can capture that increasing asset value over time. The importance of getting the public realm right and considering interim activation opportunities. And then exploring opportunities for partnerships with foundations to achieve some of the other public goals we would like to see on the site. So moving forward, here's the high-level timeline for the project. Again, we closed on the post office acquisition this past fall, and construction is underway at their replacement site at Colwood. They anticipate to vacate the site late 2018, which would allow us to proceed with development at that time. We have multiple phases of community engagement proposed moving forward, including around kind of this initial project scoping work and development of a draft solicitation for a development partner. Then this summer going out with that solicitation, and then initiating the master plan and community benefits discussions the fall of 2017 for about approximately 1 year timeline. That would allow us to enter into agreements with development partner for continued design, permitting, construction. We may also have the opportunity to do additional development solicitations at that time following the master plan work. So diving in a little more detail, again, continuing the scoping this winter, looking at community input, both around kind of engagement process as well as the developer solicitation itself, completing some site due diligence and increasing the entitlements of the site. During that time, we'll continue to brief the board as well as city staff and council members. We'll look to convene or to identify members of an owner's representative team as well as our steering committee, and then do kind of broad community engagement as this work continues. Over the summer, then soliciting and selecting a development partner, and then in the fall, kicking off the master plan kind of umbrella of activities. This includes the negotiation of the community benefits agreement, and also looking at both placemaking as well as the kind of the more standardized and called for land use master plan that the city will look at. As this work continues, or as this work starts, we will also convene working groups that will report and be supported by the steering committee, where they might dive into some topics with more detail that would report out and inform the steering committee in their work. And then the development team would also be a part of this process. As we move into implementation of development, then we would transition to an oversight committee that would help monitor our community benefits agreement and public investment into the site. The owner's representative team, we have a few kind of positions or topics identified that we think would be important. One is a capital market advisor. Again, how do we structure this deal to maximize value from the site? An equity advisor to help us determine how and who to engage to maximize equitable benefits from the site. And then a legal counsel on how to best legally structure the deal. And then representatives of the mayor's office, PDC board, and the executive director. I think this group will really help advise this kind of process and approach, and being mindful of, again, these kind of the three-legged stool that we're kind of ever balancing on this project. We would look to identify members and convene this group by late February. We'd also look to convene a steering committee in the same timeline. We've identified a number of kind of topic areas as well as geographic areas that we think should be represented in this committee. We seek your input if you have individuals or organizations that you think would be well suited here, or if we have kind of omitted an important area that should be included in this steering committee. We would solicit members both by doing some targeted outreach as well as doing an open call kind of by theme or by area as well. So again, next steps, convening the owner's representative team and the stakeholder steering committee. This will help inform the draft solicitation that we'll be writing. That work will continue into May before issuing the solicitation. We'll also prepare a communication strategy and materials that will really help us market the site and position it in the way that we want the site to be perceived, and kind of really communicate our values around this opportunity. And then completing due diligence on the potential reuse and/or demolition of the existing post office site and how that fits into phasing of the project. We will also work on increasing the height and floor area allowances These recommendations are in the Central City 2035 plan, but we will also be completing our own set of findings so we can move that process forward in parallel and not be tied to the city timeline. And then continuing to work with our partners at TriMet on the bus rapid transit, as well as the Greyhound uses and how we can co-locate multimodal transportation functions in this area so that work can inform future work in the master plan. So with that, I'm going to return to our two kind of key questions as well as any other input. So again, what changes, if any, do you recommend to the project approach? And then what recommendations or feedback do you have for the upcoming solicitation?
Well, I would have just a question to start off with. I'm just curious about the kind of the mechanics of the master planning process and kind of how that will play out. Will PDC sort of lead that then, or will the city take a more active role, you know, through the planning folks there, or how will that work?
So we will be holding a contract with CGF. They will identify, they're in the process now of kind of scoping out that process and kind of key activities, as well as who, from a sub-consultant perspective, will need to be on their team to address kind of different topic areas. We've had conversations with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. There is current code language around what's required of a master plan. Partway through our work, they'll be transitioning, most likely, to future code language around what's required of a master plan. And so we will be addressing both, knowing that we may initially be submitting our application under one set, but transitioning and addressing the future priorities as well. And so they are becoming increasingly prescriptive of what needs to be addressed by the master plan.
Do you envision having the developer, consultant, whatever you're going to call it, on board for that process?
We do. We think based on some of the case study outreach that we did, we heard a lot of feedback that as you get, if you are in the position of doing some, like we did the framework plan and has some flexibility, that that's less necessary as you move to a much more kind of defined planning process. Having someone who actually will kind of inform and then immediately implement that plan becomes increasingly important.
Do you see that developer carrying on through the whole process? In other words, are we going out for somebody as a consultant or somebody that potentially is, for lack of a better term, the master developer?
I think as part of our second question that we seek your input on kind of what should be our first offering as part of the solicitation. I think we're balancing kind of PDC's long-term interest in the property and whether we want to continue to retain some control, and then also balancing our financial requirements of paying off a line of credit. So there is some amount of property that we will need to dispose of early on, and whether we go out for different solicitations. I think also being mindful of kind of what opportunities we can offer the development community and how there might be partnership opportunities.
If I might, I think, just to add on that, I think that our perspective is that it would be advisable for the developer who comes in and works with us through the master planning process to have some opportunities at the site, but probably not the entire portion, so that it might be the first of a number of solicitations. And so I think, you know, that's what we did on the Burnside Bridgehead, and obviously it's of a different scale, but we think that that might be a good approach here.
So just to make sure I understand, so you're talking, you would conceive of multiple prospective developers? Okay.
Yeah, probably not through the master planning process, right? So we would go out, trying to see. So we would solicit, in summer, solicit or select a development partner who will see us through the master planning process, and then potentially have rights to a certain portion of the site. Let's assume that that's a good portion of phase one. That phase is complete, and then, you know, we have a sense of what the other phases are. I don't think that they would be excluded from going back out, right, and coming back for the second phases, but I think we might say that it's open to other development interests as well.
Do we envision paying that developer for his or her services?
During the master planning process? I don't know. I mean,
We had not, and I don't believe we did on the Burnside Bridgehead project.
I think if.
I think we might have, we'll get back to you on that one.
Just one thought is, you know, I think you ought to be contemplating that there might be a development entity that comes in that has the horsepower and the skill sets we would like to see and the mindset we'd like to see that could do the whole thing. So how do we, you know, deal with the one that's on early that may not be the one that's there at the end for whatever reason?
We'll also hold conversations with the Portland Housing Bureau as they have some ownership of sites, so whether their development rights are incorporated within a larger development or whether they also will land bank some property and then go out with a solicitation separately. So that's also a conversation we're having with them.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in your due diligence and looking at the other sites that you displayed earlier, I think there was San Francisco and Seattle and a couple others. Were those larger developments controlled by one developer primarily, or did they carve those up into multiple developers? And the reason I ask is because I've only seen, one big development even comparable to this, and it worked, and that one played out in sort of an awkward way in that multiple developers were ultimately chosen, and at the outset it was contemplated there would just be one developer, and then by switching over to multiple, there were all kinds of unanticipated consequences to that, which were not great. So anyway, just curious how
There's a
those played out in
variety.
those other ones.
It was a variety. So I think Denver Union Station was probably the most akin to having a single master developer for the whole site. There were other partners, but I think that was probably the most similar to that approach. Some others were multiple parties over a longer period of time. River South is an example where I think a nonprofit organization kind of managed by the city held some parcels but sought multiple developers over time, as well as kind of other parcels that were part of that plan were just under separate ownership from the beginning. So that one probably was on the other end of that spectrum.
Going through those 5 case studies, for lack of a better term, did staff have the opportunity to speak with their counterpart in those cities?
Yes. We held phone interviews with everyone except for South Lake Union.
Yeah, I would share the concern about, and I don't know what the balance is. I'm really struggling with it. Tom and I sat in on that meeting the other day, and I think I came out with more questions than I went in with. And, just to be candid, I've envisioned one master developer and for the same reason you speak to. And then on the other hand, with all of the non-financial attributes that we're seeking, I don't know what the right solution is. And to me, that's kind of the toughest thing, I think, for us to grapple with going into it. And I presume that you're envisioning a conversation with the people sitting at this table as we go down that road and talk about the pros and cons. And I like where you've got, and maybe you've got different members of the commission sitting in on different pieces of it. For example, on the legal side, you'd be a natural and so on and so forth.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we would like to expedite convening an owner's representative team to help advise us on kind of on the approach and kind of balance these multiple priorities and holding those conversations with you. So we will certainly be back to continue that conversation as well.
So to take the bait on your slideshow, what is power of 10? And lighter, cheaper, quicker.
So Fred Kent was the founder of Project for Public Spaces, and the Power of 10 concept, he admits it's a kind of perhaps a random number, but generally he argues that as a region we should have kind of 10 attractors, and within each of those attractors we should have 10 activities, and with each of those activities we should have kind of 10 micro activities. And so it's really the thought that to not design kind of single-use public spaces, and so to really have a broad range. Then the lighter, quicker, cheaper is very much as it sounds, so being very kind of nimble in our approach, having opportunities to kind of test activations, kind of playing with the site, if you will, until you get it right. And it's a way that we'd like to consider engaging people early through the process as well. Are there kind of ways that we can do demonstrations? Union Station is an asset we own, and so how do you draw people to the site and understand why they would want to continue to come to the site over a period of time?
2 thoughts on the master plan process, and that would be flexibility, because what we think is going to be there today isn't going to be there tomorrow, demand-wise. We might think it's going to be housing and ends up needing to be commercial or vice versa, whatever the case may be. The other thought, coming out of our meeting the other day, ZGF, along with a lot of firms, are great firms and they do great design work. I think a lot of firms, both on the architectural side and I know on the development side, we are fascinated with bright, shiny objects. And I think in this, from a regional and statewide perspective, thinking about how we can show off Oregon product. And Tom and I have had a number of conversations around wood, and just thinking of ways beyond the typical highest high-rise shiniest glass you can find type of design. And I wish I could give you more definition than that, but just thinking about how we balance sensitivities of place and what our state does so well.
I think the conversation we had with the various community, the foundations very much highlighted kind of how do we look at public benefits, not just citywide and regionally, but even beyond. So.
By the way, I was very impressed with what you put on the other day, and just the whole process. To me, I can't see my way all the way through it yet, but I know we're going to get there because we've got really great people like you and others working on it.
It just seems to me that getting our arms around who this development partner is maybe the elephant in the room at the moment. And, how do we have local developers and local architects and everyone else contract? How does the local community interrelate with that? So I know that's going to be an important subject. And
Are we out engaging with some of the local development community already?
To some degree, we've been approached by many people who are interested in the site nationally and locally, and so we have held conversations around kind of our general approach, but we have not done, similar to kind of the case study work or the interviews, we have not done kind of in-depth soliciting their preference.
I think, just to add on to that, I think we wanted to make sure that we were collectively comfortable with the process first, just so that we could help determine who was going to be at the table to make which kinds of decisions and what sequencing. So I would see that as soon as we were able to get our owners' representative team together, that really this question becomes at the forefront. Who should we be trying to solicit interest from? Who should we be talking to? And what is that solicitation? What should the structure be? I think the community conversation will obviously largely be focused on what are the benefits. The owner's representative group needs to talk about the pros and cons of these different components.
Helpful, interesting and helpful is, I don't know what the appropriate venue is in our briefings or whatever, to understand who has approached the commission. Just to get a flavor for what you're seeing out there. And then also, I think we have several young firms here in town that are doing some things really right, in my opinion. And I'd like to make sure that we reach out to them. I don't know what role there may or may not be for them in this, but if there's a role to help them, for them to be involved and for them to grow their expertise and their business and perhaps be able to export that out of Portland in the future of their careers, that would be a pretty neat outcome.
I guess I'm interested in just maybe a little bit more clarification on the owner's representative team. How do we envision that?
Excellent question. I think that we're still kind of formulating how to best approach this, but again, the idea is different from the steering committee to really advise us on kind of process and approach. And so I would see kind of the frequency of meetings may change as the project develops, but I think their advice kind of upfront of how we structure the solicitation, as well as kind of our outreach and public engagement strategy will be critical. And so I see meeting with them frequently through kind of the scoping process, and then helping us to also through the solicitation. And then their role may fall kind of secondary to the steering committee as we move into the master plan process. We're also going to be in there, and then probably, I would say, re-engaging then as we move into negotiation of agreements after the master plan.
So what's the timeline for forming that owner's representative team?
We hope to have them identified by the end of February. So we've done the initial kind of interviews with some of the capital market experts. We're following up to schedule kind of more in-depth kind of interview, kind of in-person meetings with a number of them, and then we'll have to do the same with the equity experts, as well as identifying kind of legal counsel assistance.
I presume that we will, and would like to make sure that before we select a capital markets expert, or maybe even before they're interviewed face-to-face, take advantage of our mayor's former role. What he probably was exposed to on PERS, I think would be incredibly informative. I would really appreciate any thoughts or input he has around different capital structures.
Yeah, we may want to have just a special meeting with him just to get his input on that.
I think that would be.
That's a great idea.
He probably has nothing else to do.
Yeah, he's,
Certainly nothing more important.
yeah. The streets of Portland is most important. Any other questions comments for Sarah?
Thank you very much for
Thank
all
you.
the work.
So our next item of business is information item and an update on the Northeast Community Development Initiative Action Plan. Kate, welcome.
Thank you. Chair Kelly, Commissioners, my name is Kate Dean, and I'm the manager of our Community Economic Development section. And with me today is James Paulson, who is a member of our Project Advisory Committee for the Northeast Community Development Initiative. He also is the board chair for Work Systems, Inc. And we're going to be a little bit tag team on this. Please be patient, because due to weather circumstances, our presentation may not be as smoothly coordinated as one might have wanted.
Welcome, James.
Thank you.
So I'll just start by reminding you that we were before the commission in early November, where we presented a version of the what I call the Northeast Action Plan to you. It was a 90% version, and we were just off the heels of 2 community forums where we had brought a draft plan to them, gotten some feedback, and we were about 90% way through developing the plan. And we presented our recommendations at that time. Just to frame up for you and remind you a little bit again about where we've been, how we got here. What you see here before you is the timeline. We began this process back in about a year ago. We held stakeholder interviews. We worked with our project advisory committee on pretty much a monthly basis. We developed a draft plan and held 2 community forums that were very well attended by members of the Interstate Corridor Urban Renewal Area, residents, businesses, former residents and business members. And that the focus of this plan really is around that Interstate Corridor Urban Renewal Area and the remaining uncommitted $32 million worth of tax increment financing funds that we have left. We came to you on the 9th, and we're back here today after having taken our 90% version of the plan back to our project advisory committee for their final recommendations. So when we came to you on the 9th, they had not seen that draft, and they did have some additional comments and recommendations, which we think were advisable, and we'd like to review those with you today. Just to let you know, after our meeting today and getting some feedback from you about the plan, we intend to go to the City Council at the end of the month and have the plan accepted by them. And then we will head into implementation. So we're looking forward to telling you a few of those things that have changed in the plan. And just to remind you, the focus of this plan, the goal really is to foster economic prosperity among individuals and communities that have not fully participated in the economic opportunities that have been present in the Interstate Corridor Urban Renewal Area. So $32 million over the next 5 years of tax increment financing dollars. Again, those dollars can really only be spent on physical construction, sticks and bricks. The plan remains the same except for the things that James is about to talk about. So I'll turn it over to him.
Yeah, go back to that last slide.
Okay.
All right. Hey, thank you very much for this time. I just want to say I lived this process for the last year. And the other thing that I want you to understand is that I grew up in this area. I have a small business in the area and that sort of thing. So going through this process was not like arduous. It was an opportunity to really engage in how we can, overcome some of the challenges that are faced in that area. And I think that that was the same sentiment that was felt by a lot of the other people that also sat on that subcommittee with me, and that everyone felt very passionate about the work and really wanted to do things differently than we've done in the past. And that sentiment, I think, plays through in the plans that you've seen and also the stuff that I'm going to talk about here. All right, the next slide, please. So just kind of really focusing on one of the things that we adjusted in the plan is moving away from what was called anchor projects and moving toward this cultural business hub. And one of the things that we heard when we did the focus groups with the community is, oh, we don't want an anchor. We want you to give more grants to people's homes improvements, and we just want money just to go directly to people's pockets. And in a 2-hour session with the community, it's very difficult to really dig deep and help people understand how budgets work, how TIF funding works, and that sort of things. Because through that process, we really wanted to get people, it's like a brainstorming. I want you to tell me what works for you, and then have people come back and actually put the nuts and bolts to it. And that's kind of what's happened here. Because when you think about the people on the subcommittee, myself included, we've gone through an education as we've gone through that process of really understanding how the TIF funding works, the mechanisms of it. So then when you're putting together a strategy, we can actually have a strategy that's going to be much more successful than a strategy that's kind of pie in the sky. And so that's why we kind of built back in this cultural business hub, because when we say, yeah, the people said this, but I don't think they really understood what opportunities there were with this funding and how this funding worked. And one of the key pieces that I don't think that people understood is when you make a loan for this type of a project, loans get repaid, and then those funds can be reused. And where you give a grant, that money's gone. And then there's also a balance of that. And so what we did is when we said, okay, let's look at how we can structure this a little bit differently so that people can understand how these cultural business hubs are going to be used. We said, well, let's do this. We have a 5-year window on these funds. And the last thing that we want to have happen is at the end of that 5-year period to have nothing done on the so-called anchor projects. So we said, let's put in a 3-year clause on this. So if we don't have something in the pipeline in the works after 3 years, let's go back and reevaluate how these funds can be distributed differently, because we want to make sure that these funds make it to the people who've been most affected and who will be able to put those funds to use. So one of the things is looking at, by doing this, we're also going to be able to make space available. And the thing of it is market rates, as everyone knows in Portland, in this area are extremely high for small businesses to get into. So one of the things that we said, let's make this space a space where people can bring their business, build their business in a way that they'll be able to get it off the ground so that they're not burdened with these market rate rents as they're getting started. So we put aside a lot of money to support businesses in that. And that's where that $1.5 million is. I never like to read from slides. I forgot to tell you that. I just kind of talk to the slide. And so what we really wanted to do as a subcommittee is we wanted to really put together some clear criteria, because this is work that's all going to be handed over to an oversight committee board. I don't know how it's going to be described, but in giving them the wherewithal to understand the criteria that we went through, so as they're moving forward, they would have that as kind of their guide. And so we wanted to be really specific, and that's where you start seeing where one of the things is we really called out African Americans and people of color, because when you look at the data, those are the people that are most affected in those areas, and that's why we really wanted to call that out. And as a representative of that group, I wanted to make sure that I presented that to the board. Okay, so the alignment with the action plan, which we've already shared with you, like I talked about, it provides commercial space for small businesses, African American, others to grow and thrive. The long-term community benefits is really trying to put something together. When you think of, like in Southeast Portland, the Mercado project, that's probably a good example of a project that we've kind of had in the back of our head, but there's no way to tell what project's going to present itself and make itself available over in the interstate urban renewal area. But it's just, we needed to get something so people could get their head around it, how it might work and that sort of mechanism, and really trying to create something that's going to have a lasting impact and is going to be something that people can be proud of. And, through that process, it's really making sure that one, when you think of a project, there's the contracting side and making sure that we have a diverse set of contractors that are doing the work. Then it comes into how can we also employ people so that the people that are working in these businesses really are representative of the people that we're trying to affect. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to move people into, people like to say living wage jobs. We want to move people not only into living wage jobs, but we also want people to make long-term businesses that they're able to hand down to their kids and build that type of community as well. It's actually that wealth building so that people who haven't had as much success with the growth of Portland, and now is an opportunity to kind of let them in. And here's the thing. We know that $32 million of TIF money is not a magic wand. We know that that's not going to solve all problems that the community faces, but it's a start. And it's something to really move the ball forward and create some opportunities for some people to do some incredible work. Because I think this demonstrates really that commitment on really trying to support and rebuild a community that's been very affected over the years. And this is just a first step from a financial standpoint of rebuilding that community.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Just to be very clear, the version of the plan that we brought to you at the 90% did not include, we had talked to the community about this concept of an anchor project. It was not in the 90% version. The committee recommends putting it back. And then just to confuse things, we've renamed it the Cultural Business Hub. We've been struggling all along. I mean, it's the same thing. We've been just struggling about how to describe this quickly and pithily. I don't know that we've come to the exact right name, but this is the one that we have landed on for the final draft and think that it is as close as any that we have of trying to describe this place-based, culturally specific business center that we're trying to promote. So again, new criteria has been put into the plan. So what this all means then is that we continue to have, this is kind of a summary of the investment priorities for the North-Northeast Action Plan. And so we are adding back as you see at the very bottom, $4.5 million for this cultural business hub. The $1.5 million that James referred to is a part of the second line item of supporting businesses, business ownership and growth. So about 1.5 of that $9 million is allocated towards that cultural business hub and the businesses located there for purposes of commercial affordability. But you can see here the $32 million then about really is very much focused on property ownership and redevelopment, supporting business owner growth. As I had mentioned the last time we were here, about $5 million will go into programs, new programs for middle income housing programs, and then we will continue to invest in community livability projects. So with that, I think we're concluded. We'll be at City Council on the 25th of January. We will have one final community forum in mid-November, February. And this really is our opportunity to roll the final plan out to the community and to begin talking to them about implementation. And we'll be also putting together an oversight committee. Thank you. Any questions?
So James, first of all, thank you for your participation. Greatly appreciate it. I'm envisioning this as kind of a North Portland WeWorks. Is that that kind of close to it?
If you talk to me, I would say, yeah, that'd be great. But it's really, I think it could be a number of things. I mean, it's all dependent on, one of the key things is finding a developer or developer group that comes up with some brilliant idea. And that's where we don't want to handcuff it by trying to say, oh, it's got to fit into this box, because what we'd really like to see is something very dynamic, but in the end, having it so that you have multiple people who are able to share in the benefits of this new development. And, Mercado, as I said, is an example of where you brought a lot of people together, because that's kind of the key thing, is bringing a lot of small businesses together. And really a big part of it is a lot of small businesses have a lot of hurdles as far as, oh, I can't do that. No way could I move into Class A real estate. That's just not me, right? And helping them overcome those hurdles to say, yeah, this is you. And so it's kind of beyond the, like the WeWorks, oh, we have some space and a bunch of IKEA furniture, to being much more of a community, so people are actually engaged with each other a little more deeply.
Do you envision the money being used predominantly to make the space more affordable, or providing support services such as accounting, legal, et cetera, or consulting to these budding entrepreneurs?
I think of it being more about the space. On the operational side, it's like there's other programs for that. And it's really about making a space that is affordable, that somebody could come in and feel that I can make my business successful because I'm not going to be priced out. I'm not going to take on a challenging space, make it successful to have my landlord turn around at renewal of my lease and jack up the price because now it's much more desirable than when I went in.
Do you have any notion of how big this space is?
No notion. Again, it's like we don't want to handcuff ourselves as far as saying it's got to be, a 1 block, a half block, a quarter block, but we want to have something that has some significance. It started as signature space, anchor space, and now cultural hub. However you describe it, it's got to be something where it's like, yeah, this is happening, this is working, and people can see that in the community.
Do you see this as a standalone space, or might it be a mixed use? And what I'm getting at is we invest a significant amount of money with the Housing Bureau, and quite often those ground floor spaces can be quite challenged. And I'm just wondering if there's some financial benefits around being in a mixed-use project. Maybe the space will be cheaper just because of the nature of what we're doing with the housing side of it, versus not having a standalone identity, so to speak.
Well, and see, that's, I think, what's part of the dynamicness. So if there was a project where it was like a mixed-use project and somebody came in and said, hey, I want to take the retail piece of this, and, a big developer has it, and then a project comes in and says, I want to take, the ground floor or the whatever piece of that project, that would fit in the criteria that we've set out. And because that's what it really is going to take. As you see, it takes a lot of partners to pull something together. And trying to do something on your own, probability of being less successful is higher. And so we could see all sorts of example. I think mixed use is great as we think of the city's footprint becoming more dense. That's the kind of thing, that's the kind of projects that we're going to see in the future.
Well, again, thank you for your efforts, and I would really encourage you to come back and tap the staff here at the commission to assist in developing the project and helping to make it happen beyond just financial support. Because I could see this as a great opportunity, as you pointed out, to grow expertise with young developer, architect, whatever the case may be, especially of color, and especially somebody that's from and resides in that neighborhood. So I would encourage you to come back and ask us for additional non-financial help.
All right.
Thank you.
So, just first of all, I went to one of the meetings, and I just compliment staff for their work on this and compliment you and the advisory board. I think it's been a really constructive journey from at least my vantage point. I would make a comment, and when you talked about generational wealth and how important that is and the impact it can have, is that if there's any opportunity and this, if this hub project does come about, and by the way, I think the 3-year come up with something or we don't do it is a great strategy too. It kind of pushes the, everybody to move along to do something, and if it's something that doesn't come up, that's kind of sad, but at least there's a direction on that too. But anyway, that if there is a cultural hub, that there would be opportunities for ownership and/or for, lease to own kind of opportunities where the business people aren't just renting an affordable space, they're renting an affordable space that maybe they can own at some point, which I think is so dynamically important. Just wanted to say that.
No, yeah, the thing that I think is great is when we are able to take this back in that forum, the final forum that we talked about, and being able to describe it to the community more, I think that we're going to get a lot more traction with this because we do have a little bit more demonstrated criteria, and we can help people envision what it really might look like.
Are there ideas percolating out there?
Well, there's always ideas percolating.
We hope so, anyway. Also, it seems like this is something where there's additional financial leverage that can be brought to bear. And for example, Tom's comment, which is a really good one. We've got other lending programs here. We're looking for good investments, candidly, because we need to make some money too to continue to do things like this. And as you point out, loans come around and they get used multiple times, which is a great thing. And maybe there's an opportunity after this gets off the ground for those entrepreneurs that want to own their own space to create some interesting programs to help enable them to do so and maintain that affordability and pass it on to the next generation.
The right project might inspire some funding from some foundations in the region.
Good point.
That sort of
really
thing
good
too. And
point.
I think you should be thinking about that. So I think it hits some of the priorities of, at least that I hear about from some of our local foundations.
I think staff here can help you with that as well.
That's exciting times.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank
you.
for coming, James. Well, if there isn't any further business, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
I had down until 5 o'clock.
I had it down till 5 too. This is bonus.
Yeah, that's great.
We still have our budget work session. Don't get too excited.
I thought we were
You knew that though, right?
like Jack Nicholson.
You knew that.
Yep, and then I want to move this out.